Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching today's Ag Forecast brought to you by Nutrien Ag Solutions. I've been working on some new code for you, and I'm not quite got it finished, but this is what it'll be able to do. I keep an archive of the MRMS data, and this is a map showing the last 7 days of total accumulated precipitation, but it's through midnight, okay? I started archiving both the ECMWF and the GFS, and I'm working on some code that will help resample this radar data to the native grid of the ECMWF or the GFS so we can actually do some comparison. But what I'd like for you to see here is where we had rain recently. Let's just see how the models did by just kind of eyeballing these next few pictures. Now, remember, this was through 12 a.m., so the precip that moved through Kansas this morning, for example, just as one example, is not represented on this map. But the question is, how well did the models do picking this up? So let's just look at this and then flip over. It's a little bit different projection, but again, I'm working on some new code for this. This is what the European models said we would get through early this morning, all right? Now, overall, did it do a decent job at picking up on this section of the Western Corn Belt precipitation? Yes, it did. Did it find the path of what eventually became Claudette pretty well? Yes, it did. But this area and through here, and in pockets in the Western Corn Belt and the High Plains, you could start to see that it missed. Let me show you what I'm talking about. So a week ago, did the models know this was going to happen, or the heavier rainfall in northern Missouri into this section of Iowa and Illinois? No, it didn't. It didn't pick up on that very well at all. But did the GFS? So quickly, this was the European again, and this is what the GFS forecast. So this is an area that the models just really struggled with. Both of them did. And while they may have done a better job with where Claudette eventually ended up, some places that we are very closely monitoring precipitation were the areas that we struggle the most with the forecast. And again, you know, to be honest, the vast majority of weather forecasting is done with our forecasting models. And what we do as meteorologists is we look at this and understand model performance, understand where the models have biases, and try to make logical corrections in that. But it's very challenging to do those things. So that's what we get by just looking back over, how the models are performed. Now, there's certainly been a lot of severe weather. Now, this is just looking at reports from June 16th through the 20th. So this does not include the severe weather that's going up the East Coast today, nor did it include the severe weather that was before this. But what we saw here was a lot of storms targeting an area where throughout much of the beginning of this year, we'd not seen a lot of severe weather. And I want to show you a couple of pictures that were sent to me. This one was sent to me by my good friend Charles Davis. This is actually from a storm back on last Tuesday that hit parts of South Carolina. We had hail damage here. We also had some strong straight line wind damage. Another picture here from that same event, you can just see the corn getting kind of torn to shreds here by the small hail that hit that particular area. Then my colleague and friend Andrew Pritchard was out chasing on Sunday in Iowa, Pella, Iowa, and caught this beautiful funnel cloud here. That went through in one of those storms that went through Iowa. And then I missed all of it because I was in Nashville, but I did get to see something kind of neat. This is a halo, a sun halo. And what you've got here is a bunch of column-shaped ice crystals falling through the sky, and they produce a 22-degree halo around the sun. Now, what's interesting about these ice crystals is that they were actually coming from the cirrus clouds spreading from Tropical Storm Claudette. And as of right now, Claudette is offshore. Here it is. This is just a kind of a live look late in the day here on Monday as to where Claudette is now. As I take you back and just look at this satellite animation, we can see where our storms are popping along the frontal boundary right in through here. And a lot of these storms are severe warned, in the northeast. I did see something kind of interesting, though, I thought you might want to take a closer look at. If I go sub-regional, come right in here over Nebraska, look at how the convection from earlier in the day produced what appears to be some outflow that really cleared out the sky behind it. I think that's just kind of neat to see how we punch these holes in the cumulus field from stuff like that. So with that, let's go take a look at one other parameter here before we kind of move forward with a look at our recent soil moisture, and that is a look at vertically integrated smoke. So we do have quite a bit of fire activity going on in the west, and this just takes us out over the next couple of days here, looking at how widespread the smoke will be in the atmosphere. So we're going to watch some fires here in the Four Corners states, but also in Oregon, right here almost on the border of Oregon and Washington, that need to be kept a very close eye on. But you can see what the flow is doing. Do you notice it? I want you to see two things. You see this, and you also see this. All right. This is the broader front that's sweeping through the United States, and this little low here might actually return some rain to parts of Oregon, which could desperately use it, and I'll show you that in a second. But first, total precipitation ranks through June 21st. Now, when we go back to that map at the beginning, that kind of showed us where the rains came through. Notice parts of Minnesota, the Dakotas, Nebraska were missed out, and sections of Iowa got very heavy rainfall, like in through here. So when you come back and you look at these ranks, things have improved south, but this is an area that has seen, well, each forecast keeps backing off on the rainfall totals across Minnesota, parts of South Dakota, and northern Iowa. We need to watch that very, very carefully in this part of the Corn Belt moving forward. Now, this, of course, does not include the rainfall we got this morning in parts of Kansas, which went a long way to kind of help this situation out down here. It was cooler and it was wet for a while. Now, I do want to show you the latest drought monitor. This is the one that was released last Thursday, just after I had kind of finished working on our video last Thursday. And what I want to show you from here is how much things have changed. So let's just look at the 1 week change. And we did see that before the rains this week, and we had seen another class degradation here in Iowa and parts of Wisconsin, Minnesota, and the Dakotas. And outside of that, the improvement was best seen over here along the East Coast and Mid-Atlantic. Now, to kind of put all of this together before I dive into the forecast, I would like to show you some NDVI analysis. Now, the date I'm using here is June 13th. That's because it takes about 8 days to get enough clear scenes from the EOS Terra platform on which sits the satellite MODIS to give us the maps you see here. Now, remember, in this color bar, this would be very high NDVI values, therefore the vegetation looks healthy, and over here would be the low NDVI values. Now, we're going to slide a slider bar across it, and you're first looking at June 13th, 2020, okay? Now, as I slide this back over, I'm going to reveal June 13th, 2021. So here we go. Now, I realize that's a lot of data to take in. So let's go back to 2020. And now look at 2021. Now, I would like to just zoom in on a region we've been watching quite carefully. Let's just come into the Midwest. And I'll just do this one more time. This would be 2020. And this would be 2021. You notice this distinct differences in the Dakotas. Much better a year ago than this year. Iowa looked better last year at this time than this year. And Illinois is one that looks worse last year than this year. So it's just something to take in here. A better way to summarize the entire country, though, is to show you this. What this looks at is a vegetation health index, and it's comparing it to a year ago, and the date we're looking at here is June 17th. So we can see that the crop in this area is where we're really seeing the stresses, the Columbia Basin, parts of the Snake River Valley, and of course where our drought is greatest down here in the Four Corners states. Notice that from Texas through the high plains, where we've seen a lot of precipitation throughout spring, the vegetation health index is much higher than it was a year ago. So this is one of just the valuable tools we have to kind of assess this crop from space. From that point, why don't we go take a look at those soil moisture values? I'll be very interested to see what these look like when tomorrow's data come out, and I'll put that in my morning report for those of you that are subscribed. What you got here is the top 4 inches or 10 centimeters. We can see the effects of Claudette. We can see the effect of the weekend rains in this area, but there are certain places that still need a lot more moisture to come through, and that extends back into the west as well. And this would be the top 40 centimeters or 16 inches. So just take stock of these two images as we kind of put together our forecast moving forward. The big picture idea I want you to get out of this extended forecast video is what's happening with our upper level heights. Now, as I work through this week, here we are Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. The pattern gets highly amplified. There's a very large ridge setting up over British Columbia, and that's going to send the temperatures in the Pacific Northwest way up, all right? Because of that, there will be troughs flanking it. One here over the Aleutian Islands coming out of the Bering Sea, and another one here. And this is by the time we get to Sunday. Now, as we work our way into next week, what I am most curious about is watching over the last 5 days, the models continue to produce this effect in the flow. Now, what is it? It's a building of a ridge here, almost a retrograding of a ridge, and a downstream trough, followed by another ridge in the midsection of the United States. Now, I'm out here, this is the 6th of July. So I end up seeing 1, 2, 3 ridges. 1, 2, 3. And the question becomes, is this just the pattern pushing itself toward climatology with a bit bigger ridge over the Aleutian Islands, or are we actually latching onto a real pattern here? Because if this were to set up, and if the longer range models, not only the GFS, if the ECMWF also sees this, which it does, this is the big ridge building on the west coast and then falling into a trough. This is the P&A pattern. Then that would signal just a change for the week 2 and beyond forecast. And that's what we really need to be talking about here. Because in addition to watching the tropics, the National Hurricane Center giving this a 30% chance of development right here just east of the Lesser Antilles, we need to keep eye on what's coming out of the Gulf in terms of moisture and then where the ridge sets up. Those are our two competing factors, jet stream level flow and the openness of the Gulf of Mexico to transport moisture. So just to show you, this tropical system we're watching here, so that's Claudette. This is the one we're going to watch. The environment in the Caribbean is not favorable, too much shear. So as a result, as this system tries to move into the Caribbean, as you just saw me play forward there, we lose it in the models. So let's not worry too much about that and instead focus on this figure here. What you're now looking at is the probability through the next 10 days from the 12Z European. This is the one that comes out after the market close. This is the 12Z European forecast for the probability of getting another inch of rainfall. And as you can see, there's a very sharp westward divide where these numbers start to fall off. And that gradient goes right through the state of Iowa. Much drier in the Canadian prairie, through the northern plains of the United States. But with a large high pressure cell sitting here, the flow just keeps pumping moisture out of the Gulf into the eastern part of the United States. And if there's a ridge over the west and a broader trough over the east, that just signals better lifting here. How does it do it? Well, there's multiple ways, but in general, there's a surface-based front somewhere in this area, and we need to see what that's going to do. All right. From there, let's zoom back out on this graphic to show you where we're watching today for the severe storms. They're coming out of Tennessee, Kentucky, clear into parts of the Northeast, and we saw them a moment ago on the satellite. There is a broad area already where we have severe thunderstorm watches and embedded severe thunderstorm warnings. Heat advisories down south, red flag warnings across the west. That's the main severe weather threat tonight. To just take a look at where those storms are going, let's play through this afternoon and this evening. So let's get this to about 8 o'clock Central Time. And we're going to continue to see those storms racing through the Northeast and scattered storms across much of the south and southeast. As we then go into the overnight hours, the main frontal boundary here continues to push to the east. See a lot of storms capable of producing heavy rainfall moving out of Mississippi into Alabama, Georgia. And then getting into middle of the day tomorrow, this comes from the mid-Atlantic all the way down here to the Florida Panhandle. And that's the main frontal boundary going through. We'll also keep an eye late in the day on Tuesday, right in this area for some scattered storms, maybe from Omaha to Des Moines, maybe over to Cedar Rapids, this area right in through here, late in the afternoon and evening hours. And then after that, the next system we're going to watch just starts to take shape here midweek, and you can see the effect of it, where the flow's coming like this here, but there's also a system going up through Canada. That's the system we need to be talking about. So to show you that, let's now look at both of our operational runs from 12Z, European on the right, GFS on the left. As I play this forward, let's get out to Wednesday, into Thursday, and Friday. By the end of this week, both models agree on a high amplitude ridge in the west and a trough that cuts down through here. That's what's going to keep the inclement weather, precip chances high, and the ridge is going to keep the heat west. But as we go out a little bit farther, this is into Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday. The models do diverge a little bit in the flow pattern. They both keep the ridge somewhere in the west. There it is in the GFS. Here it is in the European. They attempt to cut off a low, which means cooler weather here, and then rain out ahead of it, which we've already seen. But the GFS is a bit more progressive with the trough, bringing it farther to the east. And that's where they're going to start to separate as we get out here into the week 2 forecast. Now, these operational runs, we generally look at them out 7 to 8 days. We use the ensemble for everything after that, which we've already looked at the ensemble. So let's just take what we saw here and do the same thing by comparing the model runs. So on the left, I have the 12Z GFS, and on the right, the 12Z European. And we've looked through Monday into Tuesday, and then getting out here into Wednesday. Now remember, Tuesday might see some more precipitation in this area, but generally across the country, what we're going to be watching is actually in Canada. And it's this low here. It is both in the GFS curling up like that, and it's here in the European as well. Now what I'm concerned about is the frontal boundary that gets left right in through here. The GFS, as usual, more progressive, bringing this farther to the east. But then what you see here is that on Thursday night, that frontal boundary parked somewhere in this vicinity could bring in a lot of precipitation. My concerns for Minnesota and the Dakotas, does the front get too quickly to the south of those areas and produce rain farther to the south? Because that's what the models suggest. The GFS bringing a bullseye of precip through my home state of Illinois, the European elongating that precipitation through Wisconsin, Iowa, Northern Illinois, and Missouri. So there are some differences, but both models have it in place. So as we play this forward, how long does that frontal boundary stay there? Well, there is high pressure here in both models. See, that's kind of both off the screen. So that's just pushing into it like this. And the flow along the front is almost parallel to it, which is why when I take you here to Saturday morning and play through Saturday afternoon and evening, getting into Sunday morning, afternoon, and evening, do you see how it just stays in place? Scattered storms here, frontal boundary there, and as we even work our way out into next Monday here, and getting into Tuesday, that's Tuesday morning, afternoon, and evening, we continue to see that wide open Gulf of Mexico, and both models continue to show precip. Now that gets us out there pretty far in the operational forecast. So let's put it together here. What you're now looking at is the next 7 days forecast by the 12Z European model. And when we look at this, we do see quite a bit of wet weather. What I'm concerned about is where is that northern edge? Because Minnesota is extremely dry right now. What about the central and high plains, and how much actually falls in the Dakotas, which desperately need rain? Because these areas in through here, as those fronts just slowly move through, do appear to be quite wet, whereas the Pacific Northwest, very, very dry. This is the 12Z European. This is the 12Z GFS. You can see it's got a little different scenario, for example, through Illinois. But you can kind of look at both of them and say they have a similar pattern overall. But as you know, I like to stack them up, and this is what you got. Remember that the greens and teals, this represents where the European is wetter. These colors represent where the GFS is wetter. So take a moment, pause the video, and just have a closer look at the model comparison here. But the net effect is this is an area over which we're going to be seeing the best chances for rainfall through the next 7 days. Now, what about beyond that? Well, the European model, once we get out there into week 2, is attempting to shift the ridge to the Aleutian Islands, and so is the GFS. And as a consequence of that, it is drying out the central part of the United States. Staying wet here with the open Gulf, but drier in this area. Is the GFS on board with that? Well, this is the 12Z GFS ensemble. And we do see something like that here, and wetter in this area. The GFS has struggled down here with scattered convection all year long, so we'll keep a close eye on that as well. But given that the last 2 weeks, the ensembles have picked up on the pattern pretty well, I'm going to tend to favor what we see here and here. Okay? From there, let's talk temperatures. This is the June 1st through June 21st average temperature ranked by climate district. And I know what our eyes are quickly drawn to, from California and the Four Corner states through the Northern Plains and Great Lakes states. It has been very, very warm so far to start this June. We've had high evaporation rates as a result of this, and cooler shots of air like the ones we're getting here on Monday and Tuesday tend to be pretty short-lived. Let's take a look at what those temperatures are going to do here. So this is max temperatures today on Monday. So we've felt most of this extreme heat in the northwest, and this heat's being broken by the storms we've seen here over the northeast. By Tuesday, that cooler air really pushes through on the first front, and we're going to watch getting into Wednesday for the heat to return to the central and northern plains, triple-digit heat in the Dakotas. California, you get a break. You can see the temperatures cooling Tuesday and Wednesday, and even into Thursday. So to see temperatures in the low 90s, that's climatologically average here. But as we go from Thursday into the weekend, watch the heat build in the Pacific Northwest. There's Saturday getting into Sunday. And that's that highly amplified pattern with the big ridge that develops over British Columbia and the downstream trough that we have here over the east. So we're really resisting sustained heat in the eastern part of the country and across the south, with repeated chances of high temperatures in the central and northern plains and the Pacific Northwest, where the Columbia Basin could get well into the triple-digit heat for this upcoming weekend. From there, let's take a look at just the next 5 days kind of summarized to give us an idea here. Temperatures could be 15 to 20 degrees above normal for the Pacific Northwest. We could be 3 to 4 degrees cooler than normal across the south, southeast through the Ohio Valley. Because of that, we expect very high evaporation rates, basically from about the 100th meridian west. And over here in the Columbia Basin, some of these numbers may be between 2 and 3 inches of evaporation through the next week. And given no rainfall coming to this area, we would expect that. But one thing I did want to point out, and I kind of glossed over it, there are chances of bringing in some storms into Oregon, right in through this area. In fact, I don't want to miss that. So if you don't mind, I'd like to go back and show you where that was. Sorry, let's right in here. Watch this. Remember that little wave I showed you coming out of California? Well, there it is producing the storms into tomorrow and getting into later in the day on Tuesday into Wednesday. So that could really help with some of the fires that are going there. So I wanted to make sure I pointed that out. But as we look out here, actually, let's go back one. If we look out here into the day 5 through 10, it's very clear that the Pacific Northwest is going to go back over to some extremely hot temperatures. And what you see in the model is the reflection of that cutoff low that we saw kind of come down and set up right here. And that's what's going to keep this area cooler than normal. So heat spreads all around it to the north as another cutoff low goes over parts of Texas. Now, I want to remind you of what we saw out there by day 15, and that is the ridge that you saw building here in the Aleutian Islands toward maybe even the Bering Sea. And there was another ridge here and another ridge there. Now, thinking about this and trying to gain support for this week 2 into week 3 pattern, I wanted to let you know that atmospheric momentum has been decreasing for a while. Now, in general, if we lose a lot of momentum in the jet stream, it tends to be more blocked, more meridional, and a blocking pattern in summer spells disaster. Because for some places it means nonstop rain, and for other places it means potential for ridging and a lot of heat. And we're very careful across our GRIM regions to watch out for that. And what I notice is that right in through here, which would be where our Pacific jet stream and North Atlantic jet stream would sit, the momentum has been dropping around 30 north, and we're sitting somewhere right around average here. What we want to watch for would be these greenish blue colors expanding into this area, representing a slowdown of the northern hemisphere polar jet stream. We got to watch for that first. The second thing is all about the MJO. Now, I know you're going, what about the water temperatures? Well, at this point in the year, if the water temperatures were going to affect the flow of the atmosphere, they would have done it. It's a sensible heat transfer that takes a while. So now we look for the effect, the change in the flow of the atmosphere. The MJO appears to be starting over here in phase 1 and moving through phase 6 by the time we get through the next 3 weeks into the month of July. A lot of subsidence over the Pacific Ocean. Now, what does that phase progression mean? That's what we have to ask ourselves. Well, we can see it here by starting off in phase 1 and going into 2, quickly into 3, 4, 5, and possibly over into 6. Now, just thinking about that progression showing up in the new European extended forecast, we can look at these composite maps. Now, I understand that these are a little challenging to take in, but we know we're right now in phase 1 and 2. If it does go over into phase 3 at relatively higher amplitude, that could signal better precipitation for example, the Midwest. But just remember that the significance is relatively low for phase 3. What I'd be concerned about is we pass into phase 4, 5, and 6, you now start to see more of these brown shades showing up, meaning that we could, because of the MJO progression, have these extended, 10 plus days of drier weather depending on if the MJO stalls out in those areas. Now, what does the European model make of all of this? Well, I'm out here on July the 7th, and I want to play a 1-week sliding window for you. So this is July 1st through the 8th, and as we just play this forward, you notice that the models, while they tend to keep going out here to the middle of July, while they tend to keep a lot of this area wet, it's been in this region that we've seen the divide and drier conditions, and that's very concerning given the drought that is here in parts of the Dakotas, Nebraska, Iowa, and Minnesota. I would want nothing more than to see the moisture return to this particular area, but we're getting these hints of some drier conditions. And from there, I just like to show you that when we look out in the longer term, this is from the CFSV2 extended forecast. Now, this is temperature, just real quick. Both models agree on keeping warmth west and spreading it like this through the beginning of July. And that's also extending here into middle of July. So do you see kind of what the pattern is doing overall? But what is this model doing with precipitation? Let's flip over and see it. You see the week 3 is wettest here, although we do have this feature in the week 3. And then getting out into week 4, again, it's wetter here, but there are pockets in the CFS where you're seeing drier. while it's trying to bring in more almost southwest monsoon-like flow coming out of the Four Corners states. So we look at both models to kind of get some perspective, and that's what I wanted to show you here. To finish this up, it is good just to take a look at those ocean temperatures, so I'd like to show you what they're doing. We're still cool off the west coast. And lately, we've seen this area go back over a little cooler. It was quite warm there. Warm water is nosing into Washington, though. But one last thing to point out. The warmth that you see coming up here is not long-lived. And therefore, we expect to replace this with some cooler water, keeping that negative Pacific Decadal Oscillation around, which we've talked about these last couple of weeks. So this is what we're worried about, what we're moving forward. It's going to be the split east versus west in the middle part of the United States here on a precipitation pattern, and possibly going back over to this triple ridge setup as we get out here past the next week, which is looking quite wet in the midsection of the country. So we'll wrap it up there, and look forward to talking again on Thursday. Thank you.